My name is Steve Procopi. I'm one of the programmers here at the festival. Let's bring our guest back. Let's bring Jeff Baena back up, the writer-director. We have the two of the stars, Aubrey, Plaza, and Micucci here. Jeff, just explain what your minor was at NYU and how it relates to this film exactly.
Yeah, so I got a major in film studies, so at Tisch School of the Arts at NYU, and then I got a minor in medieval and Renaissance studies. But it was like completely accidental because I took a bunch of weird classes that I got enough credits that I didn't know until I graduated. They told me when I graduated. Like I didn't even know it wasn't on purpose.
And yet somehow you were inspired by it. Talk about, for those who don't know, explain what the Decameron is, what sort of stories are in it, and how you sort of use that as your jumping off point.
Yeah, so I wasn't familiar with the Decameron until this one class I took called Sexual Transgression in the Middle Ages and Renaissance. And we studied some other, we studied the Heptameron, the Decameron, Canterbury Tales, and the penitentials, which are the punishments the church levies against people for different crimes, generally like sexual. And so the Decameron is amazing. So it was written in around 1350, which is like 667 years ago, and it's just as funny today as it was back then. So Giovanni Micucci, who wrote it, he, instead of writing it in Latin, which is sort of like the typical way of, I guess, writing back then, he wrote it in the local Florentine dialect. And it's 10 people, it's 7 women, 3 guys, that are hiding out like in a villa from the Black Plague, and for every night they're there, which is 10 nights, each one of them tells a story, so it's 100 individual anthologically sort of combined stories. So they're all just random. And so I took one of the stories, the third day, first story, to sort of use as the framework of this, about a guy who pretends he's deaf and dumb at a convent, and then the nuns slowly just started picking him off, sleeping with him. And then there's a couple little details, but like, so for me, like I had no knowledge of this, and so the general idea was like, when I read this, was to try to create something that I guess would make this a little more accessible and human, because it's all right there. Like you guys were laughing at stuff that was like straight from the Decameron, like the cutting of the hair, and then you could see the other guy's hair, like all that stuff was like lifted straight from like one of the stories. So.
And you did end up shooting in Italy. Let me ask the actors, was that kind of, just as an acting thing, that you're that isolated, that you're kind of away from the usual things that, that wherever you live, that you're not around the people that you see all the time and you don't have the distractions of home life? Was that sort of important to sort of keep this experience pure and that you could sort of lose yourself in the time period a little bit?
I would say yes. I think it was really fun to kind of be out in the middle of the woods, running around, not a lot of screens. Yeah, I would say it was helpful.
I think also the time difference from Los Angeles to where we were was almost a different day, so we didn't really have to worry about communicating, and then also our cell phones really didn't work well to begin with, so it really did help to be in there. Yeah.
We were like in rural Tuscany. We were like way off the beaten path.
So I mean, so those castles, those are real castles. Those are like what is that like to like actually have that as your location? That has to be amazing to be able to shoot in a place like that.
It was absolutely incredible. I mean, they live in a place where there's history all around them. They just take it for granted for the most part. It's just, oh yeah, that's a convent from the 800s. But so what's really funny is the way this all came down is I was having a conversation with my friend about this class I took, and he's like, dude, you gotta make that movie. And then I asked my producer, like, because he basically was like, I'll get you $1 million to make this. And then my producer was like, you don't need it, because one of our investors who invested in my first 2 movies, her name is Micucci. She basically runs Tuscany. Her brother runs the film department, the film commission. He's a senator. Her family's like super loaded, and she's been asking these people, this like group of people that have invested in this like equity fund for like 4 years to shoot in these medieval locations, and everyone's like, okay, we're gonna do that, because like, why would you do that? And I was like, I had this medieval movie idea, and it just like all kind of came. So we had access to these crazy locations that normally I think, and also because this is like in the middle of nowhere, like some people have never seen this stuff before, like the castle at the end, which is great, is like, it's a real historical castle that is known for torture, and it's just like, yeah, like there's one.
Yeah, I was gonna say it was super creepy. To answer your question, which was how was it shooting there? And I also say that Nick Offerman loved showing up and just being given a castle. I've never seen him happier. He walked around and acted like he did own it.
If you put me in chainmail and gave me a castle, I would be pretty happy about that too. I'm curious about, because I'm always fascinated when actors they have parts of what they able to use when they act taken away from them, and you've only got like this much face showing, and you're just completely covered from head to toe. Did you have to sort of adjust in a way to your performance to take that into consideration? I'm also assuming that those habits were heavy too, so.
They were, it was actually, I thought, very helpful to kind of get in the mindset of like how just uncomfortable, and it sort of brings you down. I mean, I kind of have terrible posture to begin with, but it really just kind of it weighs on you, and it just made you feel very confined, and you can't be free in those costumes. So it really did help put you in the mindset of a nun. Do you have any thoughts on that?
No, I agree. The fabric was heavy, and and I feel like Allison would get really annoyed too. Like at the end of the day, she'd be like, "I just want to take this off." After like 2 hours, I'd be like, "Well, 12 more hours."
It did seem a little unfair that Dave Franco gets to wear like puffy white shirts unbuttoned to his navel, and like he looks so comfortable, and then you guys are. But it also works because like that way with those habits on, that like the tiniest bit of skin is like, ooh, shocking. It's like you actually get into that mindset where you're not supposed to see anything.
Ankles become really exciting.
I think that scene where Allison takes off her habit for the first time and you see her hair, you're like, oh my goodness, like it's hair, So it really does work.
When you either heard about this or got the screenplay, what was your initial reaction? Did you even think it was, if I got this in the mail, I'd go, this isn't real, this is some fantasy film no one's ever gonna make this, but what did you think when you read it? You remember, both of you.
For me, I have always wanted to be a nun, and I'm not kidding. This is correct. I have a nun collection in my house. I have a song called "I Want to Be a Nun," and so when my manager called and they said, "Hey, they want you to meet on this nun movie," and I was like, "Nun, as in N-U-N?" That's exactly what I said. And then I met Jeff, and it was like the whole time we were shooting it, I was like, "This is my dream." So for me, it was just it really was a dream come true.
My first job ever was in a convent. I was the receptionist at the Ursuline Convent in Wilmington, Delaware, and I was surrounded by nuns also growing up, but I didn't want to be one. Maybe there was like a moment, but I don't know. I just was, I forget the question.
Not getting the script, like reading that script for the first time.
Yeah, so I just blindly just said yes.
The film does deal, I think, fairly realistically with this idea of both sexual repression and then how people found ways to fight against it, even sometimes just in small ways. That's a real message, I think. Is that a real theme of the film? Was that important to sort of weave in the reality of the time? And I mean, I realize the language is not of the time, but everything else seems fairly historically accurate.
Yeah, I mean, for me, that was a priority. I researched a lot of it. I mean, even the language part of it was a decision to actually make it a little bit more relatable and accurate because, well, first of all, the area in Tuscany that we're in is notorious for cursing. Like, that's like what they're famous for. And then, if you're doing a movie that takes place in medieval Italy and you're not speaking medieval Italian, what are you going to speak, like British, like you're on Game of Thrones? Like, it doesn't make sense, like, to me. So, like, it should just be, like, something, and also she wrote it in the Florentine dialect, so it was really kind of colloquial as opposed to formal. And, I forgot the question too. The historical accuracy, so it was really, like, everything was, for me, one of the things that I learned in that class, I keep going back to this class, but was that people back then didn't want, it wasn't like, oh, I'm so religious, I'm gonna become a nun. What ended up happening was you were, generally, if you were noble, you were stuck in at a convent when you were a little girl, and you learned, it was basically school, and then when you're like 14 to 17, you get married off, but tons of people didn't, and they got stuck there, so there would be you know, if you never got married, if your husband died, if you were the youngest daughter of the family, if your father just wanted to curry more favor with the church, there's all, and this also went along with men, you got stuck in the clergy even if you didn't want to be there, and the majority of people didn't want to be there. It wasn't until like the 1400s when women started choosing to be in convents almost like as an act of feminism, but before that, you were just forced and everyone wanted to get married out, and so pretty much they were just getting messed up and having wild sex, like for real, like back then, and that's, we were reading, I read about all the crazy stuff, like Boccaccio's stories, like there's a reason why all of them are just like so bawdy, is because they were so repressed and they didn't want to be there, and they just wanted to have a good time, and they're just, you know, women in a place that, you know, ironically is supposed to be chaste.
We're going to take some questions. We're going to